There's a power in every breath. There's a power in every note. A power that starts within the heart. A power that rises through the throat.
Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and welcome back to the Disney adjacent movie marathon. Last week when I was getting the episode ready on the Nutcracker Prince, I suddenly remembered that Jenna and I had done another movie earlier this year that was also trying to copy Disney style, and also from the early 90s, the Welsh-Hungarian animated film The Princess and the Goblin. I was originally not planning to have an episode this week. I'm leaving for vacation next week, and I was just going to take some time off. But then I figured this episode may not be Disney, but it was definitely capitalizing on their style and popularity during the early years of the Disney Renaissance. So I thought instead of taking the week off, I'd just give you another bonus.
And it will always thrill the ear of those who have the power to hear the magic of a song.
So I didn't realize that this was based on a book.
Yes, by George MacDonald, who you might have also not realized he's a friend of Lewis Carroll.
Oh, no, I did not realize that.
Yes,
That's interesting.
it is interesting. And he had a daughter named Irene. She was one of Lewis Carroll's child friends, and he took pictures of her.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So it's an interesting connection. It doesn't mean anything, but it is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you read the original book?
I have. It's been a while. And also a disclaimer, I don't believe George pronounced his daughter's name weirdly. As far as I know, it was Irene.
I
For some
wondered
reason, the
about that.
movie, yeah, for some reason the movie says Irene, which actually I love that pronunciation, but I just never see any evidence that it's supposed to be pronounced that way. So
Yeah.
just to make it clear.
I wasn't sure, and after I watched, I started looking up reviews, and one thing that I read in somebody's that they were assuming that because this was like an Eastern European production, maybe they just thought that Irene was pronounced Irene. So I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. It's actually it's Hungarian, but it's also Welsh.
Yeah,
So like the Welsh would have known.
yeah,
So
that's true. I don't know. It is interesting that they would pronounce it so differently.
Yeah, that's kind of this thing about a lot of things about this movie is that it just there's just not a lot of information about the production history on it. So there's going to be some parts where we just don't know why they chose to do that.
Hmm.
Like why they chose to say Irene instead of Irene. Personally, I think Irene sounds more like whimsical, and maybe that's why.
Yeah.
But that would just be a theory. I couldn't say. Also, like for instance, another fun name tidbit is in the book, the Goblin Prince, his name is Hairlip, not Froglip. So that was another difference change they made, you know. So they certainly had opinions on changing the names of the characters for whatever reason.
What is hair lip another word for a cleft lip? Maybe that's why they changed it.
I think it might be, yes.
Hmm. So I'm assuming that the book is quite different than the movie, because I saw a lot of reviews talking about how they left out this and that and the other thing. And I haven't read the book, so I don't know. And I actually watched this with Sarah and her older sister. They both have read the book, but they said it had been so long they couldn't really remember a whole lot of it. So they weren't able to tell me how much was from the book and what wasn't.
Okay, well it's all disclaimer, it's also been a while for me, and I've only read it like once. And yes, there's I don't know, there's changes, but also like it gets the gist of the book too, if that makes sense. I don't think it's too wildly different. Like it didn't strike me as too wildly different, but I think one of the biggest changes is that like the goblins are more antagonistic than they were in the book.
Okay.
But then again, they still are pretty antagonistic. So it's hard to say. I more remember, like for instance, Curdy gets really there's more about honesty in the book. Like the honesty is a theme. Irene gets really upset when her father doesn't believe her. Oh, wait, no, not her father, Ludi. When her nursemaid doesn't believe her, because
Mhm.
Princess never lies. Then at some point, she tries to show Curdie her great great grandmother, and in the
Hmm.
movie, her great great grandmother's just not there when she tries to show him. But in the book, she is there. He can't see her because he doesn't believe in her.
Hmm.
So he thinks Irene is lying and trying to make a fool of him because she's trying to talk to her great grandmother like, why can't he see you? So it's there's more of a theme about like honesty,
Okay.
which I don't think is in the movie really. But that's all I really remember. Sorry, any major Princess and the Goblin fans. I need to reread the book. It's been a bit. There's also a sequel, which I haven't read.
Oh, for a second, I thought you meant a sequel to this movie, and I was like,
No, no. I
I feel
wish.
like the Wikipedia page would have said that if it were.
No, no. The book has a sequel. It's called The Princess and Curdie, I think.
Okay. So, did you grow up with this movie?
Yes, I did. But the funny thing is, so I was talking with my friend who lives in the UK. He's the only other person I know who we both grew up with this movie. And when we first learned we both grew up with this movie, he said, "I'm shocked that you know about it, as an American." And I
Hmm.
said, "Oh, okay. So is it like what more well known in the UK?" And he goes, "No." You're the only person I've met. um, so it's not very well known in the UK either. Maybe it might be a little bit more well known in Wales. I don't know. I did find out in doing research for this that it's the first Welsh animated movie
Hmm.
from that country. So I didn't realize that. That's pretty big. Kind of sucks for them that it didn't do so great. And then it's the 25th animated film from Hungary. And apparently it's also a co-production with Japan. And at first I assumed that it was, because, at the time, Japan was a very common, like, place to get, like extra animation done
Yeah.
that you couldn't afford to do, mostly like in-betweens.
Yeah.
But apparently when I looked up the company that's associated with them, I was expecting like an animation studio, but it was like a TV channel. So I don't know very much about that. So I'm like, oh, maybe they had more involvement than I thought. Because that seems like, I don't know. You know what I mean? I was just expecting it to be more of a animation studio, as in,
Yeah.
oh, we provided some of the work.
Hmm.
Also, the channel, the Welsh Connection, was also a TV channel in Wales. Let's see, it says produced by Welsh television station S4C. This stands for something in Welsh, but I'm not going to try to say it because I'll butcher it. And the Cardiff-based serial studio, along with Hungary's Panolia and Japan's NHK. So it was quite an international production, and strangely, there's just not that much information on like how it became a thing, like who started it, why the other companies were interested,
Hmm.
who did what, which is strange. But I'm assuming that at least with Hungary, Panonia was a film studio that did animation. So I thought, oh, okay, they probably did the animation. But then I read somewhere else that it was mostly done in Wales. So it's kind of, I don't know. There's also some conflicting information. So that's fun.
Yeah, I didn't find a whole lot of information when I looked.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just a very obscure animated film because I don't think I either had not heard of it or I just heard the name when you suggested that we do this one. So I was not familiar with it at all.
And I suggested it because it's not like a fantastic film. I'm not going to say it's somebody should watch it right now, but I think it's a very unique, like it's a very charming film in my opinion.
Hmm.
Especially for me as a child, it always gave me like this feeling like I was in a certain place, especially like the sound effects. I really love the sound effects. That sounds really strange.
No,
But just like,
I think I know
yeah,
what you mean because it does have an interesting sound. Like
yeah,
even like
like,
the creatures, they
yeah.
don't sound like you would expect normal creatures to sound.
And then just like the Foley work, I think that's what it's called, right? Sound,
Yeah.
just like with the stones, because there's a lot of stones in this movie. It involves quite a
Hmm.
lot of the underground. And like every time they move a stone, it's like, yes, thank you. It sounds good. And Sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna be a bit weird. Um, and I don't know, just like certain things always hit me. Like as a kid, would have loved to have a secret panel that went up to like a abandoned tower in my room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Or I would have loved a magic ring. I might have not loved, trying to be kidnapped by goblins. Maybe not that part, but I don't know. I really like this film. I'm glad I grew up with it. So, what was your opinion as someone who never saw this film before?
It was fine. I think I expected it. I think I went in expecting it to be worse than it was because
Mm,
I didn't read a whole lot of reviews, but I read enough to know that it wasn't very well liked. So I think I assumed it was going to be awful, but it wasn't. So I guess it helps to go in with low expectations.
I think a lot of the film reviews, especially the contemporary ones, because it came out in Hungary in 1991, the UK in 1992, and it didn't come out in the US till 1994, which is the same year as The Lion King.
Yeah, I read that
So,
it
like,
had the
yeah,
misfortune of opening with The Lion King, and that kind
yeah.
of killed it in the US.
Though I'm going to be real, I don't think it would have done well in the US regardless.
I kind of don't think so either, because we had other things that this was similar to that never went very far. So,
Yeah, I think maybe it would have caught a little bit more interest by itself because girls are into, especially little girls are into like princesses and castles, and
mhm.
I think there's a lot of fantasy elements that might have caught some attention, but it would have never done that well ever. But with the way it was, its circumstances basically squashed it.
Hmm.
And there's actually something about Hemdale, the distributor Hemdale. They were so discouraged by the negative reviews, they actually started asking film critics to watch with their children and then ask their children what they thought. And which,
That is a way to get more positive reviews. Yes.
yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because it is a children's film, so I mean, they're
Yes.
not wrong, you know. And I do think this film would appeals more to children than it does adults, to be honest.
Yes. When I was watching it, I was thinking that there was a lot in this that, not that it didn't make sense, but it's like fairy tale logic. Like you just have to go with it. And
Yeah,
kids can more easily just go with it than adults can.
yeah, and I think because I remember that's why I don't remember how I got this movie because my parents weren't really into it. They didn't really see why I liked it. But it's I don't know. It's a kids' film. It is what it is.
Hmm.
It knows its audience. Unfortunately, it doesn't really try to appeal to adults. But I kind of like that it doesn't. But that's just me having grown up with it.
I think that's fine because not everything has to be for everyone. Like technically, I think that there aren't enough movies made for kids these days. They make a lot that are like family movies, and sometimes they don't work hard enough to make it actually for everyone. Like they put in either too much for adults or too much for kids, and then it ends up kind of not feeling like it's for anybody, if you know
That's a
what I
good
mean.
point. Yeah. Princess and the Goblin, I feel like, is definitely targeted at kids. I don't feel like
Yes.
they care about the adults.
No, I
And I
didn't get
kind of
that at
like
all.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you also have people who argue, like, oh, good children's films appeal to everyone. And it's like, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think some adults, I feel like as an adult, I could take pleasure in like what it's trying to do and its quality.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. I don't, okay, it's trash, but I like it. Like, it's dull and it's boring for a lot of people because I remember my friend and I were trying to show another friend, and our other friend just did not like it. We were like, oh, I guess you have to grow up with it.
That's kind of what I was thinking when I was watching. I was like, this seems like the kind of movie that if I'd had as a kid, I would have nostalgia for as an adult, and that would make me really like this. But since I
Yeah.
didn't, I did find it kind of boring.
I expected that.
But
But
that's
anyway, do
better
you
than
have
finding
any?
it awful because I went in expecting to find it awful, and I did not find it awful. It was okay.
I think it at least with other like kid only movies, I think it fares rather well. Like there's
Yeah.
another movie I remember watching a lot as a kid was a really bad animated version of The Secret Garden. And
I think I did a
I
podcast on that. If it's the
you
one
might
I'm
have.
thinking of, because there is a
Is it like 90s?
94, I believe. And it's, as far as I know, it's the only animated Secret Garden. So it's probably what we're
It
thinking of,
probably
the same
is.
thing.
Yeah. And I try to watch that. I watched a lot as a kid, and it's to the point where I never had the live action Secret Garden. I only grew up with this animated version. And I tried to watch it again as an adult, and it was like, this is bad. This is bad. And I stopped watching it. So I don't know. So in that comparison, they're both movies for kids. But
Uh-huh.
personally, I would put Princess and the Goblin a little higher up than, that kind of for kid movie. But that's
Mm,
just, I don't know. I am mildly biased, and I probably am. So
probably, but that's fine.
yeah. Do you have any notes? Any comments?
Well, we could talk about the cast before we get into the movie itself, because I was going through the cast and I was like, don't know this person, don't know this person, don't know this person, until I got to the last one, Molly Sugden. I was like, that's Mrs. Slocum.
I don't know who that is. Who's that?
I probably had a weird childhood, but I grew up watching British comedies every Saturday night.
Um,
And she was one of the stars of Are You Being Served? She was this middle-aged older woman who always had ridiculously giant colored hair. Like the show is not a kid show. Like if an adult watches it, they would be like, why would a child be even into this? I don't know why I was into it. We always just watched British comedies. And I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before or not, but whatever.
hmm.
We went to my grandparents' house one night or one weekend, and we wanted to watch Britcoms because we always watch Britcoms. So we were watching Are You Being Served? And my grandpa turned to my mom. He's like, you let them watch this show? This should be rated R.
Oh my gosh.
And watching it as an adult, I know what he's talking about, because there's some like really inappropriate for kids content in that show, but it all went over my head as a kid. I had no idea what they were talking about.
To be fair, I think a lot of British media in general, they have a lot lower bar for
Yes,
that
oh
kind of thing.
definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So yeah.
that Molly Sugden was Mrs. Slocum in that show, and as a kid, I loved that show, and she's just kind of iconic in my head.
Well, another cast member that I recognized was, I might not say his name right, Roy Kinnear. He was the Cheshire Cat in the 1972 Alice.
I thought that, because after I saw that, I was like, well, I'll just go through everybody and see if I noticed anything in their IMDb page. When I got to
Yeah.
him, like I didn't recognize him right away, but I started scrolling through, and then I was like, oh, I recognize that and that, and I was like, Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland 1972. Well, Jenna's gonna recognize him for sure.
I did. Though it's funny though, because when I was reading the cast list, I was like, "Oh wait, he's in this. Who does he play?" And it says Mump, and I'm like, "Who the heck is Mump?" And it took me a while to realize it's just a random goblin that
Yeah.
he's dropping on.
Yes.
Apparently, that was his final screen role. So what a screen role to end on.
There was a couple people I read that it was their final role.
Oh, that's not good.
The Goblin Queen, also Peggy Mount. It was both of their final film role.
Oh, well, she did a good job.
She had a great voice.
Yeah.
I didn't think I recognized her, but again, looking at her IMDb page, she was in Oliver, the old musical, and she did a couple
I've never
episodes
seen
of
it.
Doctor Who. So I guess I had seen her before, but it's been so long since I'd seen anything she was in that I didn't recognize her.
And then my friend wanted me to, because I told my friend I was doing this one, and he goes, "You gotta mention Rick." I don't know how to say his name. Rick Malayal for the Prince Froglip. He was like a punk singer.
Let's see. I was going to mention Froglip as well. Rick Mayall.
Mayal, yeah. Apparently, he was approached to do Lion King, and I guess he didn't do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't recognize him just by the name, but when I looked at his IMDb page, he was Mr. Toad in the version of The Wind in the Willows that I grew up with. So
Yeah, my friend mentioned that too.
after I watched the movie or started watching it, I heard his voice. I was like, yeah, I recognize his voice now. Well, I guess we can go through the movie. It did not take me very long to write down everything that happened because the plot wasn't very
The plot's very simple.
detailed.
Yeah.
But I did have notes as I went through because some things stood out to me.
All right, hit me with it.
I watched it twice. I watched it yesterday with my cousins, and I watched it again today to make my notes. So the second time I watched it through, it started, I was like, oh yeah, there's narration. The king narrated the beginning and the end, and I completely forgot. And I didn't even realize it was the king until I watched this time, because I remembered at the end of the last watch yesterday, when the narration started up at the end, I was like, wait, who's talking? I don't remember narration in this movie. But it was the king. He's talking about her being safe in the hands of her devoted nanny, and that's Lootie, played by Molly Sugden.
Mm.
And I thought it was funny because Lootie seems to be just there for plot exposition.
Yeah.
And I was watching it with Sarah, and when Lootie was talking at one point, Sarah starts quoting the Great Muppet Caper. It's plot exposition. It has to go somewhere. Because she says things like, "Oh, she's a lovely girl, really regal. Well, she would be, what with her being a princess and all." She's just talking to herself.
Yeah, it's the stupidest self dialogue. Yeah.
And I also thought it was interesting that Lootie worries about strange things happening. And then later she's told about a strange thing and she just thinks she's lying. Like,
Yeah.
she seems like the perfect person to be superstitious and terrified of goblins, but when she's told about goblins, she's like, oh, there's no such thing.
What's interesting is I think in the book she's actually there with Irene when she sees the goblins. They're both rescued by Curdy. But I don't remember if she like goes into not denial after it, or yeah, I'm not sure what goes on. I remember she accuses Irene of lying about her grandmother.
Well, this whole scene with I keep wanting to say Irene, but it's Irene. This whole scene with her lost in the forest and all these creatures around her, it reminded me of Snow White, except there's actual danger here. In Snow White, it was mostly her imagination making her think that like a log was an alligator and a tree branch was an arm.
Yeah.
But this was like that, except there actually were horrifying creatures chasing after her.
Yeah, I remember that. It does have a very similar vibe. Well, Irene is a lot like Snow White, actually, when you think about it. Like, kind of naive and innocent.
I suppose, yeah.
But yes, I that's a good comparison. It is a lot like that scene. For some reason, I always preferred the Princess and the Goblin scene over the Snow White scene as a kid, though.
Well, she gets saved by this boy named Curdy.
Which is a strange name.
It is. And he's singing this song, and this song comes up throughout the entire movie. Like,
it's the only song in the whole movie.
Yes, whenever they need to sing a song, it's this song.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was watching with my cousins, and Sasha, I think, said that it was an 80s power ballad. It was like the medieval version of an 80s power ballad. So then every time somebody started singing, I was thinking to myself that they're saving themselves with an 80s power ballad.
And that's not a bad time to associate it with, because the movie would have been done in the late 80s.
Yeah.
So it probably kind of was, yes.
Yeah. So Curdy explains everything that's going on. Apparently there's these goblins that live in the mountains, and all these creatures were their pets, and they can only be driven away by singing. And for some reason, everybody in the village and like the mining village that they live in knows about the goblins, but nobody that lives in the castle knows about the goblins.
Yeah.
I feel like you would think that word would get around. Like, why don't even the guards know?
I think at some point, I think in the book, but don't quote me, I think in the book it's kind of implied that they are like, they're not supposed to know.
And that's that would make more sense.
Yeah, that's part of why, like, for instance, it's so important that Irene is with Lootie, because the king doesn't want her to meet these goblins. So
Oh, so the
I don't.
king knows in the book.
I think the king knows in the book, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember. That's the problem. I can't remember. But there is kind of like this willful ignorance coming on. Though you could also say maybe it's like kind of a class difference.
Hmm.
Like the people in the castle don't have to deal with the goblins, so they don't bother to notice. Whereas
Yeah,
the miners obviously have to deal with them, so they of course notice.
yeah, that makes sense.
So you think the miners would like bring it up at some point, like, hey, there's like a lot of goblins that are making it hard for us. And
Yeah,
everyone else they're trying to tell is like, I don't see any goblin. What are you talking about?
well, that's why I wondered. You would think word would get around. Like, I would assume that there would be like a miner who was friends with a guard, and the miner would tell the guard, and then the guard could tell the other guards. So I wouldn't think that nobody in the castle would know. But that's what I mean. Like, there was a lot of stuff that's just fairy tale logic. So I was just like, yeah, I'll go with it.
Yeah,
And it's like kids aren't going to think of this stuff.
yeah, they're just like castle mine, different.
Yeah,
No interaction between the two. But yeah, I think it is a little bit of a class difference here.
yeah.
I can't remember. Did the movie go into how the goblins came about?
They didn't say specifically, but they made some mention of the goblins used to be more like people when they lived above ground.
Yes. Yeah.
So does that mean that they were people, or are they just like another race of creatures that turned kind of monstrous when they went below
From what
ground?
I understand is they were people basically, but then they went underground and they were driven underground, I believe.
Okay. Well, I wondered, and maybe it's different in the book, but it seemed like if they were people, it seemed weird that none of them had more than one toe, except for the queen who had six toes for some reason, which was never explained. I kept waiting for that to be like a big reveal. Like I assumed that the queen was going to be revealed to be human, and that's why she had so many more toes than the others, because they made a big deal out of her having six toes, and then that went nowhere. I was like,
Yeah,
okay.
that goes nowhere. She just has six toes. She's special. So actually, the interesting thing is in the book, the Goblin Prince is described as being the half-breed child of the Goblin King and a human woman, and the Goblin Queen is his stepmother. In the film, the prince
Hmm.
is entirely goblin, and the queen is his birth mother.
Okay.
So I don't know if they kind of like took that idea and maybe for some reason they decided they wanted the Goblin Prince to be full goblin, and maybe they were going to do that with the queen instead, and then for some reason they ended up not doing it at all, but the toes were left over. Who knows?
It could be. Because I thought that they were going to do something like that with the toe reveal. But then there wasn't
Yeah,
really much more of a reveal other than the fact that they pulled off a shoe and there was six toes.
yeah. There's no explanation for it. She looks very goblin otherwise.
Yeah. Did the prince remind you of anything?
No. Like,
He seemed like he was supposed to be modeled after like an 80s goth look.
I can't say I really noticed.
Like I'm not an expert in 80s goth culture, but I've seen enough pictures that I just feel like the hair, even though I don't think goths would have had pink hair, but just like the hair just seemed very goth. The cape, there was a skull on the cape. He just seemed like an 80s goth.
I don't know. I think I'm kind of used to like 80s and 90s media having that kind of aesthetic for villains, I guess.
Okay.
So I never really associated it, but I don't know. It could be possible.
Yeah, I don't
Oh,
know.
fun trivia. Um, they apparently used to have media events in the US with performers dressed as Irene, Curdy, and the Goblin Prince, Froglip. And
Okay.
Froglip would have been in like this sculpted mask. There's pictures of the sculpted mask on DeviantArt because the sculptor had pictures of it, but I've never seen pictures of the events in questions. And I just
Huh.
thought that was interesting. Like some kids must have been traumatized by this somewhere, and we don't, it's like lost media in a sense. There's no pictures of it. Like
Interesting.
I want pictures. Preferably, I like a video.
Yeah. You would think that that would exist somewhere, but I don't know.
It must exist on somebody's home video somewhere. They're just like, I don't know what the heck this is. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting tidbit. They did
Yeah,
try to market it.
they tried. It
They
didn't seem to
tried being
work
the
very well.
operative word. Yeah.
Well, anyways, Ludi ends up forbidding Irene from leaving the castle the next day, and she ends up discovering a magic door leading to the ghost of her great great grandmother.
I love that door. I want it.
When you said that you would have loved something like that as a kid, it reminded me of back to the Secret Garden. The version of Secret Garden I grew up with, I think, was 1991, and there was a secret door in there, and I just thought that was the coolest idea. Like a secret door. It wasn't a castle, it was like a big mansion, but it was still a secret door that led through a tunnel through the mansion, and I just thought that was the coolest idea. That reminded me of this.
Is that in the book? It's been forever since I've read Secret Garden.
I'm not sure if it was in the book or not. It's been too long since I've actually read the book.
Is that the live action version that everyone's seen, or is that like a different version?
There are several live action versions, but I think it's the one that most people think of. It was from 1991, and I know it's like the one that has the most 90s nostalgia.
Okay. I need to see that again. It's been a while.
It's good. And I don't think I'm just saying that because I grew up with it. I think it is actually a good movie.
A lot of people would agree with you. But yeah, I think especially in a lot of children's media, you get a lot of this secret door leading somewhere in
Uh-huh.
in a kid's room.
Yeah. In the book, maybe you don't even remember, like her great great grandmother says that something like she's not exactly a ghost, she's sort of magic.
Yeah.
Is it actually her actual great great grandmother? Like, did she die and come back as a ghost, or
It's vague in the book too. From what I understand, it is her great grandmother, but there's some kind of implication that she's changed in some way.
she like Gandalf the White?
I
She just
guess.
comes back. She's
Yeah,
not really dead. She just comes back, and now she's more magic than before.
if I remember in the book, Irene actually mentions to the king that she's named, like her great great grandmother, who she's named after, and that the king verifies that yes, you are named after your, great 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 grandmother or whatever, and that she did used to live in like that tower. Though he doesn't necessarily like she doesn't. I don't remember if she tells him that she met him because I think at that point she was still upset by Ludi not believing her.
Hmm.
But anyway, so it's verified in the book that she's not like imagining this. This is her great grandmother, but she's also like something a bit, I don't know. She's a ghost, but also like isn't. You know what I mean? It's magic. Yeah, that sums it
Yeah,
up.
yeah. That's one of the things where it's just like it's fairy tale logic. I'm just gonna go with it.
I kind of enjoy how vague it is in a way, though. Like, I think we like to put a lot of labels on things sometimes, especially in stories.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's kind of nice to have a little bit of a mystery, but
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
the only thing else I remember from the book is her great grandmother changes her like appearance like age wise whenever like depending on how she feels. So
Hmm.
like sometimes she looks old, sometimes she looks young.
That kind of reminds me of the book version of what we know as the Blue Fairy from Pinocchio. I'm like in Pinocchio mindset right now because I'm doing so many versions of Pinocchio. But
Oh yeah,
the fairy in the book, when Pinocchio first meets her, she's basically a young girl. But then
yeah,
later on, when he finds her again, she's basically becomes his mother because she's much older. She's like 1,000 years old anyway.
yeah.
But
At some point they call each other like brother and sister, and then later it's mother.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's really weird. Yeah, it's pretty confusing.
yeah.
So how would you feel if your great great grandmother was living in a secret room in your room?
I don't know.
You wouldn't be like, I'm gonna call the police.
Well, I don't know that I would call the police anyways, because I would think that they would be thinking that I was crazy and would probably haul me off somewhere. This guy is seeing somebody who died 100 years ago. We better do something.
No, I think I probably think it was a homeless person. I mean, come on.
I guess maybe if they weren't shimmery like her great great grandmother was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, she's obviously magic.
Yeah.
Things are changing, flowers are appearing, her hair's flowing. She's magic, obviously. If somebody started doing that, I probably wouldn't think they were homeless. I'd probably think I was having like I don't know, like a trip, like I got drugged somehow.
I'm ill. I have a fever. I'm seeing things.
I'm ill. I need to go to the hospital or something. Goodbye. And then I come back and they're still there. I'm like, okay, well now we have to fight because this is my secret room.
Are you enjoying this episode of the podcast? Do you want more content from me and my friends on the iHeart Movies Podcast Network? We have exclusive bonus episodes, extended episodes, preview content, and more waiting for you right now on Patreon. Patrons also get the chance to request episodes, so if you want me to cover something I've never done before, sign up and let me know. Well, anyways, the grandmother is there because she's telling her that she's going to be there to help her, and she's basically warning her that she's soon going to be in grave danger. Which
Yeah, pretty
seems,
much.
I feel like I would be a bit more terrified if someone told me that.
But she's so calming.
Yeah, yeah.
And she got pretty flowers, pretty dress. If someone's pretty, everything's fine. That's what I've learned from children's movies.
Yes, of course. Just like real life.
Yeah.
This also led to a scene that I thought was kind of hilarious. I think this is where Sarah quoted The Great Muppet Caper, because Ludy's looking all over the place for her, and she just goes, "Poor girl, and what with her mother dead?" Just randomly.
I forget how weird Ludi is.
And during all this, you also have Curdy working with his father in the mines, and he ends up falling into the realm of the goblins and ends up like getting taken by mistake in a goblin mining cart.
Yeah, with Mump and Gump.
Yes.
Or Glump. Yeah.
Yes. And this is where he overhears they have this evil plan. They're going to flood
Some people.
Yeah. My question is, and this is another thing where I just told myself, fairy tale logic, go with it. How are they flooding the above ground with the below ground water? Because they can't like pump it up. Like, I don't understand how the flooding works.
It's a good question. Especially in the movie, I believe the castle kind of is depicted kind of like on a hillside, right?
Yeah.
Or something.
And that's what I was thinking too, but every time that they go to the goblin place, it shows them going down, like down, down, down.
Yeah.
So I was just confused.
I have no idea. Any miners in the chat, can you help us out? Yeah, I don't think there's any logic behind it. I've been playing Minecraft lately, and my brain's just going, "Oh, they're putting soul sand underneath. That must be it." Like, so it's shooting up. I have no idea.
This whole scene is also where you learn about the goblins, and I realized on my second watch that Mump and Glump were also basically Ludi in that they were just plot exposition, because watching it through, I realized, oh, they're just giving him all the information he needs to defeat them, because they're talking about how the prince
Sensitive feet.
Yeah, he would torture them by stomping on their feet because they only have one toe for some reason, and it's very sensitive, which you'd think they would wear shoes. Like, only the queen wears shoes for some reason.
Yeah, that is also another weird thing. Is at first you think, oh, maybe she wears shoes because it's like a power, like none of you guys can wear shoes, right?
It could be.
Yeah. But then it turns out she's just trying to hide her toes.
Which I still have questions about, but whatever, it's fine.
I don't know if you'll ever get answers to those questions.
Probably not.
You're probably going to die with them. Like, you'll be on your deathbed surrounded by all your descendants, and they go, I hope you had it was a great life, right? You did everything you wanted, and you'd be like, I never got the answer to why the Goblin Queen had 6 toes.
It's all I ever wanted to know.
Anyway, so I don't remember it ever being explained in the book either.
Did she have six toes in the book?
I don't remember that. I feel like that would be mentioned, but I don't know. I remember. I don't know. I'm annoyed with myself because I'm remembering like some things from the book really well, and other things not at all. But I guess that's how it goes when it's been a while.
Yeah,
But as a kid, I always assumed it was a power dynamic thing.
it probably was. They just didn't explain it.
Yeah. The one thing they didn't explain in their plot exposition characters.
They won. The only thing. Everything else was perfectly explained.
Oh, and how the water got up.
Yes, yes. Well, eventually, Curdie escapes and warns his father, and Irene warns her father. So the kingdom is now on goblin alert, but they weren't alert enough because Irene is attacked by a goblin cat.
Oh yeah, that was
And
weird.
it was also weird. Like, why is she saved by this random mouse? Like, where did this mouse come from, and why is it guarding her door? Like, why isn't a human guarding her?
Because they're stupid. This is a kingdom of stupid people.
It
The
it
mouse
does
was just
seem
like,
that
I
way.
know these people are stupid. I'm gonna have to take care of things myself.
But then you don't really see the mouse again. He's kind of just here for this scene, I think.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. It would have been nice to see him a bit more.
I also didn't really understand what this goblin cat was doing because, like, he's fighting with her cat and this mouse, and, like, he winds up on her bed at some point, and I thought he was dead because he's just lying there with this stricken look on his face for the longest time. I was like, did they kill him? But then he's not dead. And I was like, well, why is he just lying there?
For the jump scare, of course. That was a strange scene. By the way, in the book, I do remember that turnip is not a thing in the book. Like she doesn't have a cat.
Okay, I
So
wondered
yeah,
because when I asked Sarah about the book, she said the main thing that she remembers about the book was a cat with sticks for legs. I was like, well, that one has actual legs, so she didn't really remember what she was thinking of.
it's probably one of the goblin pets,
Probably. It
which
could have
might have
been
been
maybe
that.
this thing.
Yeah, because the goblins do have pets. Yes.
Yeah. Including a thing that I thought was like a dinosaur, except it looked like it had an old man face and alien antennas.
Oh, like the snailish thing.
Yeah, I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I don't think that has a name. When I was looking up information right before this, I saw a note somebody made differences between the movie and the book, and they have this creature is not in the book, and I was like, oh, thanks. Like, who could have known?
It also made a very strange noise.
Oh yeah, I did. I remember that. The underground is so like kind of echoey, and I really like the fully rock sound effects, so
Hmm.
I enjoy that. And the cart like going around tunnel and the weird sounds that the thing makes. Yeah,
Yeah, it kind of makes a gurgling noise.
yeah. And then we never see him again, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think so. Not after Curdie goes back there a second time.
Yeah.
Yeah, during this attack, Curdie goes down to the Goblin Kingdom by himself for some reason, which seems like the dumbest idea because his dad was planning on going and he was like, well, he doesn't know the way. I better just go. And I'm just like, okay, child, you're obviously in for danger here.
Oh, you know what? If I remember correctly, I think he's even like even stupider, braver in the book. Like, for instance, when he goes into the Goblin Kingdom the first time, it's by accident in the movie, right? He doesn't really mean to go. He just kind of ends up there.
Yeah.
But in the book, he's like, I'm gonna go. I want to know what they're doing. You know. So he's more stupid in the book, but also more brave.
I suppose it depends on how old he is supposed to be. Because if he's supposed to be like 8, maybe I could see that. Because like maybe an 8-year-old wouldn't really understand the danger. Because they did
I
seem
feel
like they
like
were supposed to be pretty young.
I think Irene is supposed to be 8, and Curdie is supposed to be a little bit older.
Okay. They didn't seem like typical Disney princess, like 16. They seemed like they were
Oh
little
no, they're
kids.
yeah, they're kids. That's
Yeah.
another thing I enjoy about the movie is that they're kids.
Yeah. They're actual kids rather than teenagers or adults in the Disney movies.
Yeah.
'Cause a lot of those fairy tales, they are kids in the originals, but then they aged them up for Disney.
Which one are you thinking of?
Snow White for sure. I think she was like 12 maybe in the original, wasn't she? 10 or 12? I don't think she
Um,
was a teenager.
I mean, that probably depends on what you define as the original.
That's true. There's so many
Yeah,
quote unquote
because so many
originals.
people call the Grimm stories the original, and they were not the original.
Yeah, yeah.
But that said, the Disney Snow White's supposed to be like 14, from what I
Yeah, she
understand.
doesn't look very 14 though.
She
She's
looks like a
like
child and a woman at the same time.
she kind of does.
Yeah.
Well, eventually Curdy finds out after eavesdropping on the royal family that they have this plan to abduct the princess and marry her off to Froglip so that the humans will then be ruled by the goblins because if they merge the kingdoms, then everybody can join, even though they want to like turn them into slaves, I think. I'm not sure exactly what they want to do with them. Maybe mine stuff, but they've destroyed the mine, or they're going to destroy the mine. So I don't really know what the goblins are thinking.
Yeah, it's not really explained very well what they're expecting. Especially like they keep going on about how ugly the Sun People are. So it's like, why bother like having him marry her when he's going to be stuck with her as a wife, presumably? Like, what's the point?
They also talk about, I think, the humans becoming more like them if they're put underground too.
Yeah,
So I don't know. Maybe they think that she'll eventually be beautiful in their eyes.
maybe, I guess. Seems like that would be a generational thing, though, I would assume. But I don't know. It's fairy tale logic.
Yes. At some point in here, Curdy ends up caught and thrown in a dungeon. But you also have Irene after her midnight attack, dreaming of her grandmother. Well, actually, there were two scenes, and I didn't really understand why the two scenes were split up because she met her grandmother in the wall again, and she gave her a magic thread and a ring so that she could follow it and find her own magic. But then she goes back to bed, and then she dreams of her grandmother telling her to follow the string. And I was like, why
Yeah.
didn't she just combine these two scenes and the grandmother tell her to follow the string now instead of making her go back to bed and then dream of her and then go out again? It seemed like, I don't know, they needed to stretch for time, but it doesn't matter. It's just me
Yeah.
being,
Well, is it like supposed to be a time skip? And for some reason, I don't know.
I think it's still the same night.
Is it?
I don't think there was a day in between any of this because this is the scenes in between her meeting her grandmother the first time and then having the dream was Curdy going down into the dungeon and overhearing the plan and then getting caught.
Hmm.
There wasn't like a day scene in between that, so I think it was the same night.
Yeah.
And if it was supposed to be a time skip, then they just didn't do it very well.
Communicate it. Yeah.
But again, fairy tale logic. I'll just go with it.
When I was a kid, I know that was a ball of yarn, but I really felt like it was a ball when I was a kid and I wanted it.
Very sparkly ball.
It looked pretty. I wanted to bounce it, bring it to the playground, have all the other kids be jealous, you know.
Witness my sparkly ball and be
Yeah.
jealous.
It connects to my ring, so I could bring it out anytime I want. You know, can't steal it. I'll find it. I got a threat to it. But yeah, I also really always like the idea. I always like the idea of magic jewelry. So you give me a
Mhm.
ring that like can lead me places. I like it. I would
My
love to have a ring that takes me home.
my far too logical brain was like, so if this magical ring is connected to this string at all times, is she just trailing string everywhere? And why doesn't somebody trip over it?
Yeah, you're too logical, man. This is fairy
I
tale.
know, I
Yeah.
know. But yeah, she follows the string and she ends up finding Curdy in the dungeon. There's like a back entrance or something. So she breaks him out. And for some reason, instead of escaping, they decide to go deeper. I was like, just run away. Get out of there. You already know what you need to know.
Isn't she following the string?
Oh, she might have been.
Yeah.
The
She's like, we
string.
gotta go this way. And he's like, yeah, and he's like, no. And she's like, the thread's going this way.
Listen to the magic string. No questions asked.
Yeah, he can't even see the thread. He's like, oh, I want to follow this crazy princess. But yeah, there's this element that Irene is playing pretend. It goes along with the honesty theme, right?
I suppose.
Yeah,
Not having read the book, I guess. But yeah,
yeah.
I suppose it would. I don't, if the string was leading her deeper, did they find out something more? Because, like, the only thing that really was revealed after that was that the queen has 6 toes, because they, like, sneak into their bedroom and take off one of her shoes. Is that the only thing that they needed to know? And then turns out they didn't really even need to know that?
Um, that's a good question. It doesn't really affect the plot, does it?
No.
No.
That's why it was one of my main questions. Why does this thing have 6 toes?
Yeah, because you think, okay, they're following the thread, so yeah, it must be like you think it must be an important plot point,
Mm-hmm.
but no, it's not really. Well, I guess it's at the plot point that if a toe is sensitive, then the queen having 6 toes means she's extra sensitive. Is that?
Maybe, but I feel like there was a scene later on where they stomped on her toes and she didn't react to that much.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, even if that was the case, it does it really make that big of a difference? I mean, I guess Curdy tries harder to break her shoe later, whereas you could argue maybe if he
Yeah,
didn't know that, he probably wouldn't have tried to break her shoe.
yeah, I don't know. That also leads to another question of why did she never have 2 shoes again? Because, like, they didn't take the shoe with them, but she never put it back on when she got out of bed, and then she just went up to invade and only had one shoe.
I'm sure she must have a closet.
I'm just saying there's a lot of things about this queen's foot that I have questions about.
No, no, I never noticed that as a kid.
I'm sure it probably was one of those things where it had a point and then there was a scene probably cut for time and then it doesn't make sense anymore.
It might be. Yeah, that's something that kind of saddens me about this movie is that there's going to be so many details about this production that I'm never going to know,
Hmm.
and I would actually really like to know.
Well, the kids eventually escape and Irene tries to take him back to meet her grandmother, but she doesn't appear. So they have a argument about it and he leaves to go warn everyone. Except he ends up startling the guards and they hurt him.
Yeah,
Like at first I wasn't sure what happened, but then like this thing appears on his leg. I was like, is that supposed to be blood?
yeah, I think it is.
And then did they just throw him in a dungeon?
Yes,
I was like, why did these two people think that throwing him in a dungeon is going to do anything? Are they like trying to hide the evidence or are they actually trying to help him? I was confused like why he ended up in a dungeon.
I think it's both in a sense. I guess the idea is that they wanted him to get better first, or they didn't know why he was there. I don't know. It's very fairy tale logic.
Yeah.
I don't remember if that's explained in the book or not, because I believe the same thing does happen, because he believes Irene when he's healed, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I know that that's why that part of it happened. It's just the guards,
Yeah.
like putting him in the dungeon. That's what I'm confused about. It doesn't seem like a very good idea to just put somebody in a dungeon without getting a doctor,
I guess they didn't know about infection back then.
I suppose.
There's just like, this seems as good a place as any for a sick person to be.
There's some hay. You just lie on that
Yeah.
and get better.
Yeah.
But during this, Irene decides that her grandmother wasn't appearing because she wants her to think for herself. So she goes back to Ludi and demands that she fetch her father. Like she's like actually being demanding and like a tyrant queen.
She actually has like a little throne in her room.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
she goes up and sits on the throne to give Ludi orders.
Which is like, why does she have a throne in her room?
Practice.
In practice. But you know what, Irene, I would too. You know, if I was a princess, I'd have a throne in my playroom. Yeah, my nursery. Why not?
So Ludi gets her father. She warns him about the goblins. They double the guard. But for some reason, after this, Ludi goes and gets drunk. I was like, what?
Oh yeah.
And I don't know who this other guy is. I don't know if it's her husband or what. But she and this guy are in the wine cellar getting drunk. And then the goblins come up through the floor. and freak her
Yeah.
out.
Can you imagine being drunk and then goblins come out of the floor?
That would be enough to cure someone's alcoholism, I would think.
Just be like, I'm swearing off the drink. I've seen things. I never got the impression that was her husband, but I don't know.
That's the only thing I could think of. It didn't say that. I just thought,
Yeah.
unless it's just some random other servant that she's friends with. I don't know.
Yeah. I just thought it was some random other servant. I don't think it's ever said, but
I mean, it probably is, because otherwise I would think that a husband would have been mentioned.
yeah. I think it'd be a bit more obvious.
Probably, yeah. But anyways, while this is happening, Curdy is awoken by her grandmother's ghost. I mean, Curdy is awoken by Irene's grandmother's
Yeah.
ghost.
Gotcha.
And she heals his injuries. So now he believes, because he actually saw her. And he runs off to fight the goblins, unaware that he's now being followed by Prince Froglip. And he goes to tell Irene to lock herself in her room, but it's too late. Somehow Froglip snuck in while they were talking.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
He's tall and ugly, and they don't notice him.
Yeah, you'd think they would have seen him, but whatever. Fairy tale logic.
Yeah.
So as soon as Curdy's gone, she's captured. So he runs around the castle telling everyone how to defeat the goblins. They have to stomp on their feet and sing. So now everybody's singing the 80s power ballad.
Yeah. You know, the real reason why it works against the goblins is because they're sick of that song.
It could be. It's the only one they know.
Yeah, they're just like something else, please.
The goblins retreat, but they go back and flood the mine. And I guess the miners must have been warned about the coming flood because they've built this wall. But for the amount of water that's coming, it doesn't look like the wall should be enough. Plus, the water somehow goes up. You'd think the water would go over this wall before it would go up. I don't understand the physics of this movie. This is where I was just like, okay, whatever, it's a fairy tale. And also, another thing that I noticed with this scene was the miners all brace themselves against the wall. And I was like, this will do literally nothing if this wall comes down. Curdy eventually finds Irene being held by Froglip, and they all end up falling into the floodwaters and going down this river. But Curdy manages to rescue Irene and kick Froglip over a waterfall, presumably killing him.
Oh, yeah.
And then they all sing the 80s power ballad in victory.
And hopefully they have castle insurance.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's going to smell real moldy after a while.
They also realized how I don't know, I always got the impression as a kid her dad didn't live there or something.
I don't really know what was
weird.
up with the dad. I think maybe he was just traveling for kingly duties. I don't know. Maybe.
But it does seem weirdly really secluded. And you'd think there'd be more of a court if he lived there full time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which makes me think it's kind of like a holiday home, something that he's let his daughter live at because he thinks she might be safer there.
Safer above the mines.
Little does he know. But anyway, I hope you, even if you didn't exactly enjoy it, I hope you found it interesting.
Yeah, like I said, it was fine. I didn't love it. I don't know that I would watch it again, but I'm glad I watched it. I like watching old, obscure movies that most people have never heard of. That's the point of the podcast sometimes. Well, it will be the point of my new podcast, finding things that nobody's ever heard of in addition to the ones everybody knows about. Because, I mean, not that I loved this one, but sometimes you find a hidden gem. It's just interesting to see what other things are out there beyond just Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks.
Yeah, and now I'm really interested to check out more of the Hungarian Film Studios animations.
Yeah.
So I may do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll let you know if I see anything good.
Yeah. If you do, we'll have to do another one maybe. I know there's other things, other Eastern European versions of things. There's a Winnie the Pooh from, well, I don't know. I was going to say Latvia, but I think that's wrong.
Oh,
I
I
know
know
there's
there's
a
a
Winnie
Shirley
the
Temple
Pooh.
version of Princess and the Frog. I haven't seen it yet, though.
Oh,
I
that's
know, Princess and the Frog,
interesting.
Princess and the Goblin. Yeah.
Oh, that's even more interesting.
Yeah, that was back. That was when I say Shirley Temple, I don't mean when she was a kid. It was when she was an adult and she had like her own TV show.
Oh, the fairy tale theater or whatever it was called.
Yeah, storybook theater or
Something like that.
something.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
that's still
yeah.
interesting. Maybe Princess and the Goblin will have to get a mini series on every version ever. All two
It probably would.
versions.
It probably would be a short version. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can't think of any other versions there are. But if you did want to check out another version of it, there's one.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't mention to you, but the VHS tape, and this is very iconic for a lot of people who grew up with this movie, in the US at least. So do you remember phone cards being like a really big thing in the 90s?
Are you
Like
talking
prepaid
about?
phone calls cards. Like you would go on a payphone and you'd have this phone card with like a number. So it was prepaid already.
I
And
think I vaguely know what you're talking about, but I would never have used one myself, so I wouldn't have known what they were or how to use them.
yeah, they were kind of like a gimmick at the time.
Hmm.
So the Princess and the Goblin had a very strange opening to the VHS where it had a live actress playing Irene's great grandmother, and she has a phone card, and she's basically advertising the Princess and the Goblin phone card. So when you're away from home, like you're separated from your parents, you could find a payphone and you could call, and I guess it would somehow like that's the thing. I don't know exactly how this would have worked, but I guess it would have like let you contact your parents somehow. But the main thing was like it would have like you would have listened to messages of Irene and Curdy and the great grandmother talking to you, I guess to keep you calm while you were lost. I don't know. It was a very strange concept.
This is like the weirdest tie-in merch ever.
Yeah, it really is. And honestly, this reminds me, I want to get the phone card. I never had it as a kid. I kind of want to get it now. But it's like lost media, whatever these messages were, right?
Yeah,
Because as far as I never found anybody talk about like actually calling the number. Just everyone remembers the weird commercial. So that's also very it's a very strange tie-in.
yeah.
And then on the other hand, I don't really understand this film's legal status, to be honest. Like I've had my own copy of the Laserdisc on YouTube like for ages now with no takedowns. Like finding it on DVD can be rather expensive, and to be honest, the DVD quality isn't very good. It's just a rip of the VHS.
Hmm.
There's no like actual transfer, like a retransfer of the film.
Hmm.
And amazingly, there's somebody on eBay once in a while. They have a copy of the film, like the film reel, and it's gorgeous. I want it so badly, but it's so expensive, and then I don't have the equipment to transfer it.
Yeah.
But anyway, if anyone does, look that up. It's on eBay,
Hmm.
and that's it. That's all my notes.
Okay. Well, I suppose we probably could end this one there. It's a strange note to end it on, but it's a strange movie, so why not a tie-in phone card that people may or may not have used to reunite them with parents when they're lost?
It's very mysterious, just like the great grandmother herself.
Yeah. Well, I guess until the next episode, do you want to let people know where they can find you?
I'm Phantomwise on YouTube, and I was still Johnson Phantomwise on Tumblr.
Okay.
Oh, and I have this movie on my other YouTube channel, Love Gift of a Fairy Tale. It's from the Laserdisc if you want to see that. It's the best quality version of currently available. Check it
Okay.
out.
Okay. Well, we will probably see you in a month or two for another episode. We've got a couple more things in the works, so we'll see you then.
All right, it'll be fun. Thanks for checking it out.
Thanks for listening to the Disney Movie Marathon. If you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform or to our YouTube channel. Make sure to follow my co-hosts as well, and if you want more content from us, check out one of the other podcasts in the iHeart Movies Podcast Network, or check out my brand new Patreon. My link tree, as well as any other relevant links, will be in the description. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.